You should see it going live.
Live.
Hey, welcome and happy 2015. I'm joined by Des Traynor, product strategy god and co-founder of Intercom.
Hey Mark, how's it going?
Really good, Des. Where are you today?
Today I'm in Dublin. Yeah, if I was in San Francisco, it would be way, way, way too early for me. So.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people joining us though from San Fran. So if anybody's around, say hi. I've got a little team of people. One of whom's just run off, but this is Joe, who's
Hey,
this is Joe's first broadcast with us at Business Software. He's joined and is going to be helping out with doing some marketing and community management. So appreciate you coming in. I think there'll be people joining as we speak. First of all, did you have a good break, or did you even have a break at all?
I had a great break. Yeah, we finished up at Intercom on Christmas Eve, and then I went to a lovely castle in the west of Ireland for a couple of days. And then I just, a lot of time relaxing, a lot of time reading and reflecting. And I think I really enjoy reading around Christmas. I think it's a great time to do it. You have a long, uninterrupted period. You can actually get on topics that aren't immediately applicable, but actually have a long-term value.
Yeah, no, that makes similar sort of for me, although less reading and more building of Lego-related products and Arduino products with my children, actually. So, no, it was a great break. So you've done how many talks at Business Software now? 3. 2 lightning talks.
2 lightning and a proper presentation just there in October.
I think they're all proper presentations. The lightning talks are harder, right?
Yes, they're harder. I'm big into, I guess, control when I'm speaking. I hate speaking at conferences where I can't use my own laptop, I can't use my own slides, I can't edit the slides on the day or whatever. And thankfully, Business Software is not one of those. But for a very, very justifiable reason, for lightning talks, you have to have a better control on things. So for me, the biggest stress comes from the fact that you might come up with a great idea with like 2 hours to go, and you just have to accept that's not going to be a part of the presentation. So that's part of it for sure. But I like the whole 30-second thing. The thing that spooked me the first year was like for most people they're like, oh my god, the slides move so quick, whereas I genuinely find the exact opposite. I find shit, I need to put a lot of material on the slide to be 30 seconds to talk all the way through it. So you saw how I solved that the second year.
Yeah, it was the most entrepreneurial approach ever.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of funny because like you look at the number of slides I used in my presentation third year, it was actually a faster transition ratio than any lightning talk. So lightning talks are definitely harder, but like they're harder for the right reason. They force you to condense a lot of content concisely. I think it's very, very easy to bury a long talk in just in what I call like filling up with bread, 4 case studies on making the same point over and over again, or any of that sort of stuff.
No, I hear you. And I think one of the really interesting things about that talk was it was clear that there was enough content in there for a good hour of conversation anyway. So, which was one of the reasons that we wanted you back last year. And yeah, it was one of the things that we talked about was how you kind of went about preparing for your long talk, or your proper talk, as you call it.
Yeah.
Because you were sort of taking notes from the end of BoS the year before.
That's correct. I actually have an email thread myself that ran from the very moment you first said I could speak, which is on the day 3 of the conference. And basically, anytime I had any interesting thought that was spurred by a blog post, an article, an image, a moment in traffic, like observing how drinking Diet Coke with lime and realizing it's disgusting, like anything that I thought I was like, shit, there's actually a bigger principle at play here. I would just write them down and send them to myself, and I still have that entire email thread. But the one key takeaway for me, that's really only of value to conference organizers, which I realize isn't our audience here, but one thing is that the longer a speaker knows in advance, what he's going to talk about or what she's going to talk about, the better material you're going to get. And then obviously, like, don't cripple them then by saying, give us your slides 3 months in advance in some proxy PowerPoint format. But certainly, like, yeah, the talk benefited from the fact that it was literally, I guess, probably 11 months of thought around product principles and how I could condense it into 47 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, and it was, incredibly well received as again. And in fact, we were talking before Christmas, and one of the things that I'm excited to announce today is that you're going to be coming to Business of Software Europe this year.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Yeah. Fun times.
So are we. So that's the end of June, and we've had a whole ton of people sign up already. So I guess it's great that people are trusting us that we'll produce something good. And there we are. We've got Des. What more do we need? We'll leave Kathy Sierra behind this time. So product strategy is about saying no. And I think one of the things that you talked about in your talk, and one of the great illustrations of why this is a good thing is the Swiss Army knife versus the scalpel. Mm-hmm. It's all very well when you're a startup because you can start with nothing and you can build from there. What happens as you start to grow? And I guess this is something that you've experienced at Intercom, is some pretty rapid growth. How do you take stuff out of a product, or are you taking stuff out? Did you get it right from the beginning this time?
No, so we definitely take stuff out. We've definitely retired many features. We've thrown away multiple different iterations on, say, redesigned inboxes. We've killed whole features. We had like a message visualization timeline that's gone. We used to have our ability to reply with emoticons, with like a stickery type of behavior. That's gone. We used to have a relationship measurement tool that would tell you like how frequently you're in a gone. So we're certainly like, when it comes to like, curating the product, we certainly walk the walk. I think when you talk about like, going to larger companies and hitting like the enterprise itself or whatever, what's interesting is you do inevitably attract people who are more and more used to being, I guess like, a larger customer with a deeper relationship with a much more client vendor as opposed to user product. And sorry, I have a little error here saying that my presentation is over. Is that right? Or
no, don't think so.
Cool. So what's tricky is you will inevitably have like two significant chunks of your market, at least, probably more, but let's say just two, with slightly different demands best met by slightly different solutions. And the laziest way to try and solve that is to just have like two different tabs with two different features. And like the danger there is that you're exposing the danger is really in the decision mindset, because it's actually, as this plays out over years, is where the real implications happen. But like when you're exposing lots of functionality that no one uses to people who specifically don't use it, you end up in trouble. So what you want to kind of move towards is a modular design architecture, which sounds like a real fancy word, but what I really mean is like a lot of conditional screens. So like, if you're on this screen and you're not using that particular feature or that particular package, you don't see any of this junk that you would never touch. Which kind of basically means, if you can imagine, like if we want to consider a Swiss Army knife to be like all things that anyone uses all dumped into one product, like what you want to fight for is like, you have all of these things in the background, but like depending on what packages or what products or what jobs you have to do, the right features and the right elements come to the forefront. So like a stupid example would be like if say in Intercom we have the ability to group. So Intercom, very quickly it's like a communications platform for internet businesses to talk to their customers. If you're like say a project management tool or something, your end users tend to group together in things like companies. If you're Instagram, your users don't group together in things like companies, they're just all individual. And that's broadly what B2B versus B2C is about, right?
Sure.
So as a design principle, you don't want to show B2C features to B2B people. And that's something that we wrestle with quite a bit in Intercom. And conversely, you don't want to do the opposite either. You don't want to say like every single user is at their own company or something dumb. So what a lot of what you're doing is just fighting. As I said again, the stupidest thing you could do here is just throw all features on the screen in some big messy tab navigation. Fighting against that takes a lot of extra work, but you kind of get paid back for it because any given screen then looks like it was designed to do what it's doing, rather than what you see in sort of the early 2000s era web software, which is just it looks like the developer vomited up a load of UI components and they all ended up on the screen. The balance is hard, but it's important that that's basically what I see when I talk about sort of modular design architecture. I just mean let people see the shit that they're actually using and paying to use, and don't let them see anything else, unless you're trying to upsell them or something.
Got you. Now we should have some people coming in with Q&A, but it seems to be disabled at the moment. We're trying to rectify that, and we'll certainly come back. But if people do have questions, come at us on Twitter on BoS 2015. Use the hashtag BoS 2015. And I know there were a number of people that had things to ask as you came in. So
Cool.
We'll try and get the Q&A feature back on, but maybe Google's just said no to one of their dev teams, even as we speak. We were testing it out earlier on. Seemed to be fine. When you've taken features out of your product, have you ever lost a customer as a result? I mean, even a single one?
Yeah, I would guess so. I'm struggling to come up with an exact example, but I would guess so. Or I'd guess it wasn't specifically that feature, but by removing that particular feature, we indicated that we weren't going to go further in that direction, and they took that to mean that maybe it was time to find a tool that better fit them. I think a lot of it comes down genuinely to how you go about end-of-lifing a feature. So the best practices that we found is there's different phases you go through. So let's say you want to kill a feature that's 6% of your active monthly users. That's going to be tricky because 6% is reasonably high. But let's say, so that'll be a big enough call. But if you decide to go ahead with it, you have a few things you want to do. First of all, if you know you're going to kill it, stop exposing it to new users. So don't go any deeper into the problem, right? That's stage one. Stage two is out of those 6%, evaluate the different types of usage. So you might see that 6% of people have a calendar event, but you need to work out who are actual habitual calendar users versus who once played around with it a year ago, right? So you break that down. People who played around with it a year ago, yeah, you can just message them and say, hey, we're killing this feature. Really sorry. And one crucial thing: always have conviction in what you're saying. Don't make it sound like you want opinions on it, because it is happening. If it's happening, it's happening. But if you ask people for feedback as you do, you create the illusion that you're actually going to change your opinion based on what they say, and that's a really bad thing to do, because it's like literally asking someone's opinion and they're barefaced ignoring it. So basically, the next phase. So first of all, is stop showing to new users. Secondly, kill it for everyone who seems to be using it but hasn't used it actively or aren't using it in any real sense. Then lastly, you decide what's a good end of life period. So you can sort of say if it's 90 days, 120 days, whatever, and sort of say on December 8th. We did this really recently with we retired an old way to do in-app messaging, and basically what we did was we designed a migration path for everyone who was still on the old system. We addressed a couple of issues that they had with the new system. We gave 120 days, and then we just force migrated everyone at the end, because that was it. The time was up. And it is true to say there's a bit of work. People are I'm sure someone listening to this call right now will be like, "Are you guys out of your ever-loving minds? Why don't you just kill the feature and be brave about it?" I think there's a balance you have to strike. If you do that, you piss off a lot of customers, and you also send a message you don't really care about your customers. So that's why you don't do that. On the flip side, why kill it at all? That sounds like a lot of code you have to write, building migration paths and sending all these messages and all that. Why bother doing it at all? Well, you actually, you have to compare that with the cost of maintaining this stagnant code base and all the bugs that will inevitably pop up in it for the years to come. As I said, at Business and Software, I think like nothing scales better than technical debt. So like whenever
There's many a lightning talk submission on that one as well, and many lightning talks.
Yeah. But yeah, so whenever you have the opportunity to get rid of some code and get rid of some like basically unvaluable administrative tasks that you have to do, whether it's like keeping stuff alive or giving support or feedback or any of that sort of stuff that any individual feature does, you're better off getting rid of it. So yes, there's a little bit of cost up front, but like it's way better off than carrying around a bulky piece of product that's that's not delivering any value for you, and in fact, if anything, it's just disappointing customers.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. You talked about modular build.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you think you'll never have to go back and rebuild the platform?
I don't really know the short answer, but like I think our platform has expanded quite a bit. I mean, when you talk about rebuild, you can talk. There's a difference between like say we might re-architect components because we want to use a better data store or we want to have more efficient APIs or whatever. There's that type of rebuild. I think that all that sort of work will always make sense as we progress and add more features. We'll find different bottlenecks and solve them. But I think we're not going to fundamentally change what Intercom is about. Like there will always be users, there will always be companies, there will always be messages, there will always be all these sort of core building blocks like filters, etc. That and I think so. It might be like you're probably familiar with the sitcom like Only Fools and Horses and the character Trigger. And Trigger has a brush that he says is his dad's brush and his dad's brush before him. And the boy asks him what's the story with the brush, and he goes, "Well, we've changed the head on it 5 times and the handle 7 times. Same brush all over." Like one man's rewrite is another man's, I guess, progressive part replacement for optimization reasons.
So what brought you to your philosophy of product management, product strategy? What were the sort of key influences for you? Was it a lot of trial and error and extreme pain, and work something out, or who's influenced you?
I think the biggest personal influences is probably people I work with every day. Like our CEO Owen, I've worked with Owen for 7 years, and we're kind of quite. We're partners. We're like sort of partners, so like we're kind of different, and that's where the strength is. If you know what I mean, we complement each other's weaknesses, or whatever way you want to phrase that. But like one thing, like I think one area where I really where what really solidified my opinion about I don't want to, I don't ever want to become the person who beats the drum of product strategy saying no. That's just a really punchy way to say it, something that's been said for years. But like we used to be a consultancy, and as a consultancy, clients see you as like a vending machine that they put in a certain amount of money and then they want as much out of it as possible. So, and they see the quantity coming in breadth of features, not in depth of features. So, the point I was always at pains to make to clients would be like, yes, we can add like geospatial targeting for your adverts, but bear in mind, every single one of these features is something you're going to have to maintain, and you're going to have to continue to work with. And don't think that you're getting it for free out of us by shouting at us and pounding the table in a meeting. You're not. Like people, I think features from a naive software point of view are seen as they're seen as being like this bonus, this added extra. Whereas it's much more to me like what I imagine. Let's to use a weak example, it's much more like children. If I told you there's somebody in the street giving away free children, would you go and be like, "Oh, sweet, stock up"? No, you wouldn't. Each of these needs to be fed and nurtured and educated and matured, and we need to bring them all along this journey that we're bringing. So let's only bring the ones we really like. Or rather, let's not fill the car just because we can. So whenever people would come to us with a budget of let's say 50K, 100K, or whatever, I'd always be like, the less stuff you do, the better we're going to do it, and the more stuff you want to do, the worse product you're going to get because your budget's fixed.
Yeah.
And that kind of played out but I think Intercom to some degree is a we believe that because it's part of the experience we've had, but it's also just true that like the intercom core idea is so simple and so strong that like it actually doesn't need a shitload of whistles and bells. What it actually needs is the core feature done really, really well. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is doing this really well at the moment? I mean, as startups, who are the companies that are really focused on product that you admire?
I really like so just a random handful. I really like Trello. I like how they've Trello like are tackling like you can either call it the most complicated problem in the world or the simplest problem in the world. But I think they're like what Trello are doing is pretty smart in my opinion. They're like I think in 5 years' time we'll look back and say shit, how no one saw that coming. But like I think basically what they're doing is they're burying a lot of like the product has gotten quite powerful, you might say quite complex, but they've hidden it really well and through a lot of progressive disclosure of complexity. All these features are invisible until you start using them. All that sort of stuff is done very, very well. 37 Signals, or rather, sorry, Basecamp, I should say. They're like you know, they've gone quite deep in a very simple set of features, very simple set of flows. That's pretty impressive. In Europe, there's a couple of interesting companies. There's a group called Mention at Mention.net, and Mention just do like they're like Google Alerts on steroids. Basically, anytime anyone says anything about you whatsoever, they will be able to know. You can assign a task. You can follow up. You know it's just done incredibly nicely. They have a free plan as well. I highly recommend taking a look at them.
Are they Irish? Are they Murphy or are they?
They're Parisian. They're based in Paris. Yeah, there's a really interesting group in Paris called eFounders, and they've got like just to churn out good startups. Another European startup that's based equal parts in Greece and London is Workable. Workable are online recruiting software, and basically like they own from like start to finish, from A to Z, they own the idea of you need to hire somebody. So it's like, well, here's your jobs website, here's your posting. Do you want to send this posting off to all of these different jobs boards? Yes, you do. Here's all your clients. Here's your rejection templates. Here's your acceptance templates. Here's your offer making, all the way through. And it's like like it's a great example of like there's another version of Workable where they say, right, we've got recruiting done. Now let's move on to HR, and then let's do payroll, and then they try to expand that way. Whereas what they're actually expanding is much deeper in the job to be done, which is let me build a nice-looking careers page, let me build a nice-looking job ad, let me advertise the job, let me review the candidates. They've really nailed that flow instead. So.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I've heard some very good things about them, yeah, I mean, having been through, I mean, we used an external HR consultant for our recent recruiting activity, which, I mean, you have to have ways of doing this stuff better. I'm still staggered at how bad, I mean, even job boards are at pulling good, relevant people out. I mean, we had over 200 applications for our PA role, but just kind of working out how to filter that, for example, is a really hard thing. And you've always got to strike a balance between selling the company and getting the right people. So no, that's an interesting one, and maybe we'll look at that a little bit more another time. Any others?
I really like a company called Digit. So Digit basically is a savings tool that you connect it to your bank. It's US only right now, but it's excellent. Digit, basically, it's driven 100% through SMS, which sounds batshit in 2014, but when you actually start 2015, when you actually start using it, it's actually pretty impressive. You can communicate. Digit's like a robot that basically manages your money. You can communicate with Digit, and one thing that Digit does that's really clever is he basically, the way I think of it is when you're not looking, he stashes away cash for you and pulls it out of your current account. So you can at any point, like Digit's working away in the background, taking money out of your current account. He's like, hey, we've looked at your current spending plans. You're not going to miss this 15 quid a week. I'm going to start putting that in. And then it's like, oh, you just got a bonus at work. Well, you don't actually need that bonus, so it's not going to get saved as well.
Quick, save it before you drink it.
Yeah, precisely. So I remember Rory Sutherland once made a point that
yes,
a great banking app would be a drunk saver. You just launch it, you just hit save, and it just dumps 100 quid out of your account. Digit's like a sober version of that works on your behalf. It's really clever.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So, I mean, do you have US or Irish bank accounts personally? I mean, just as a
Personally, I just have an Irish bank account. I'm going to set up a US one this year, probably.
so have you used things like Nutmeg or any of the other? I mean, there's some quite interesting.
I've seen them used, but I haven't used them myself. There's very few that, unsurprisingly, there's very few of the US or Silicon Valley startups that work with Irish banks. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think we're in a niche. Although if someone can just actually make it easy to transfer currency from one
yeah.
country to another, I think they would do very well. I mean, it seems to be sort of a massive thing for people at the moment. We've been trying to use Stripe, by the way, and can't because we are UK based and have a dollar account here. And want to charge for dollars in the States. So it's just, I mean, there are so many kind of hurdles in there.
Yeah.
In the ways of this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Stripe are great, but yeah, there's like banking is just. I know the whole industry is just it's such a step backwards whenever you do it. I'm literally came onto this hangout right after being at a bank, and like the amount of
no wonder you're so stressed.
Yeah, well, I'm stressed, but the amount of things that just are taken for granted in banking, such as like Wednesday mornings in Ireland, banks close for training for an hour. I'm like, that's just okay. I'm like, okay, but like no other company gets to just be like, hey, we're not available for this hour. Like,
actually, not true. Primary schools do this quite a lot, but they generally take a couple of days at the beginning.
yeah, fair enough.
The term.
But like other stuff, like why are banks only open for banking hours? Why can't you go to your bank at like 9 o'clock on a Monday night and talk about a mortgage? Or why can't you like go in on a weekend? Like like if there was real genuine competition here, any of these things would be fair game.
Yeah, I mean, and they would be. I mean, yeah, I mean, simple to do. So we've got a question from Alan Gleeson, I think another fellow Irishman. How does Des Traynor and Intercom decide new feature prioritization?
So product management is like the art of balancing like a few different inputs, and this kind of hints at what I spoke about in my lightning talk. But like the different inputs you have are like the core vision of what the founders originally set out to build. So like our mission in Intercom is to make web business or internet business personal. So like we want to deliver on that first and foremost. But then to do that, you have different inputs. You have, for example, let's say feature requests from existing qualified monetized customers. You have metrics about usage of different different parts of your product. So you'll realize like if everyone's using this particular piece of your product, any improvement there is going to be substantially well received as opposed to improving something that barely anyone uses. So you want to quantify some of this as well. Then like other things like there's broader themes, and it's specifically important that I'm not talking about competitors here. I'm just talking about themes of how communication is changing. And any product, whether it's like hiring or product management or project management or an intercom, they sit upon these like tectonic plates. One plate that we sit on is communication, and the nature of communication itself changes, and we don't ever want to lag behind that either. So like 7 years ago, the idea of sending a GIF of somebody crying as part of a support help desk type interaction would be unheard of. But like it is genuinely becoming commonplace that people communicate in emoji. You see it more and more, and like that's what I would consider to be personal communication. Thumbs up, smiley, wink, sad face, whatever. So like there are tectonic shifts that any business sits on. And like similarly, for example, if you're building a whiteboarding tool, you should be aware that like remote working is really kicking off, and you should think about like how you should deal with that. For us, we're building a communications tool, so we think a lot about the future of communication as well, and that's something else we look at. So to answer Alan's question, there's like probably 4 or 5 key inputs. There are like things we want to do to complete our own vision of the world we want to create. There's stuff our customers are asking for, and that falls into different categories. There's stuff that's preventing our customers using all of Intercom, stuff that like will so it would increase the adoption of Intercom within a company, versus stuff that would let them abandon other products and hopefully use more Intercom. That would be so that could result in like increased revenue for us, something like that. Then there's like bugs or like sort of just issues with our software, as in you know, like it's really annoying the way we have to do this. So could you make that better? So that they're all we're existing sort of customers. How we categorize that. Then you've got metrics, which will kind of tell you like areas where improvements will have the greatest impact. And then lastly, you've got like tectonic shifts, like as in like things that we're lagging behind on, or things where we want to get ahead of the curve. And it really is kind of a prioritized list of that. But then, like in terms of actually picking the order, it's I've talked to like a lot of product managers, as you guess, and it's like it's a nice idea that your roadmap, like that there's like strategy in the order, but there's not. Like things tend to arrive when they can arrive, not when like you know like, so if you're working on three different things at the same time, they'll probably ship in the order they're ready to ship. More than even if you did have this plan that like number two would ship before number one, so what? Uh, so like, it's like you know, like there's definitely. I mean, like just to clarify that, like what I'm saying is that when you're able to work, when you're talking about multiple sort of isolated features, they'll ship them whatever way they come out. It is also true that like to maximize impact, you will build certain features ahead of other features. So, like, you know, you might say get your email infrastructure correct before you go and build features that depend on email. Like, you know, so that's kind of the ordering is kind of different to the decision process, and like roughly, I consider that the difference between, like, say, strategy and tactics in terms of like actually running product. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, Andrei Zhukov has come in with a question about mobile, perhaps inevitably. I don't know how much you sort of track use on PC and mobile. What are the specifics in designing products for mobile? For example, there's been a growing sentiment that mobile users are less forgiving of crappy MVPs.
Mm-hmm.
Fair comment. So you actually need to invest a lot more upfront to make them work, and then you've got multi-platform and all the rest of it. So, what are your sort of experiences with that?
Yeah, so there's a few things to unravel here, but like I like the question. It sounds intuitively true that mobile users are forgiving of crappy MVP. I think we might like. I think the exit pattern for mobile users is much more obvious. They just uninstall the app, right? Also true that the standard of software that ships on your phone when you get it, and when after people install Facebook and Twitter and all that, you can't rock in with what would have been, you know, whatever the iOS equivalent of a shitty Rails prototype is. You just can't rock that into the App Store and be like, hey, it crashes every other time you click this button, but other than that, it's cool. Please try it. You know, so you definitely, I think the quality barrier is higher, but I think that's only true at the sort of, you know, web tools for web people level, in that, like, yeah, you can roll out shit on the web and people will be more forgiving. I think only when you're working within the spectrum of, like, you know, your people who sign up for things that have a big beta tag on them, right? Like, it is just true that you don't see like a beta badge on iPhone apps because you can't, right? The other caveat there is that recurring revenue on mobile isn't yet a thing. So what the reason that matters here is that, like, it means you need to cash in all of the value that you can get from a customer up front. Yes, you can try in-app purchases, but realistically, for a B2B software, it's just not going to work for, like, you know, someone's on your internal HR tool and they have to, like, enter their Apple details to get to, like, the photo badge or some shit like that. So what that means is you need to basically, you know, take down all your cash up front, which means in a lot of cases you're talking about like what would be considered to be a lot of money in mobile, i.e. $5.99, $7.99 one-time purchase. Yeah. People have this perception, and it's certainly true that there's a lot of free apps out there that are of okay quality as well. So if you're going to go and charge €8 or £8 or whatever, people do this weird divide by zero error where they compare the £8 version of a product with the £0 version of a product, and the £0 is infinitely cheaper. So and like all of this is a big roundabout way of saying what the guys from Panic said only 2 days ago. Panic are a great software house.
Cable.
Yeah, exactly. Cable software and all the gang. And they said basically it's really fucking hard to make money on mobile, and I believe it. And in fact, something I think about a lot is like, are there many significant business to business mobile only or mobile first products? And it's not like the answer to that doesn't jump out at me. I know you could say a tool like Slack, like clearly $1 billion company,
Mm.
has a hugely impressive and like a well-worked mobile offering, and we use it all the time. But if it didn't have a desktop offering, the mobile offering would be massively reduced, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you can get everyone all the time on it is what makes it work. So to go back to the original question, like it's definitely true that like the barrier for entry is high. It's also true that like the expectations of quality are high. It's also true that unfortunately there's probably not that much money to be made if the mobile is going to be the only stream through which you operate and you're selling B2B software. If you're selling B2C, it's a different thing. You've in-app purchases, you've advertisements, you've a lot of other ways to get paid. But
Sure, but does your mobile offering become the thing that differentiates you as a B2B operator? I mean, is it something that you're going to have to invest in just because people are going to want to use mobile more? I mean, I can't think of a single mobile app that we use that we pay for directly, but we use a lot of SaaS-based products that have a mobile offering of one sort or another, and it's becoming increasingly a decision or a criteria in decision making as to whether we'll use a particular CRM or something.
oh yeah, totally, yeah. So what you're talking about there is companion apps, and like yeah, in Intercom we have an Android app and we have an iOS app as well, and companion apps are really important. Basically, they're beyond really important. They're basically fundamental for any sort of significant software. Like there are a handful of tools I can imagine where it wouldn't be useful, like video editing or like I guess it's some like insane like statistics packages or something like that where you're just not like where you're going to want a large screen and a rich data input form to do it. But like yeah, for any serious web software, if you don't have a mobile app, you're not going to go too far. But that's still that only further emphasizes the point that like the money isn't in the app; it's actually on the web, and the app is a companion to the web. But like,
so how do you think about that within your own organisation? Do you see that as being a kind of almost a support cost?
Yeah, not really a support cost. It's just, I mean, I consider it to be like table stakes, basically. Like, in the same way people expect that their emails are going to get delivered, and that they can add their team to the product. They expect that they can do things on the go, and that's literally that, in my opinion. It's just another product line we have, and like it doesn't exist independently, but it's an essential part. It's
Yeah.
And like certainly I'm just trying to. Can you go back to the very original question here? He was saying that the barrier for entry is higher, but I can't remember what the follow-on question was.
For mobile,
Yeah.
so barrier to entry is higher, but what were your personal experiences? So he was sort of talking about, I guess there's a sort of thing around, it's much harder to run an MVP.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Like I would say like I'm somewhat cynical / jaded of the popularity of MVP anyway. Like I think I'm like not familiar with these mythical businesses who launched like an MVP and then ran away with it. Typically, the MVP that they launched was actually a really polished execution of a very solid core product idea. And yeah, maybe they fleshed out all the administrivia afterwards. Like maybe you couldn't delete your account on day one, maybe you couldn't add your team or whatever. But like, I'm like, in terms of like when people talk about MVPs, I always kind of get annoyed because like the V there is like the most vague and badly defined thing. Like, what is viable? Well, turns out we'll retrofit viable onto anything that worked, and then we'll say it wasn't viable if it didn't work. So then, like, if you actually reduce that down, like again, what it sounds like is MVP is the thing that worked. Therefore, any startup that worked out to be successful, we can call lean.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like,
and there's also a lot of post-rationalization of.
100% post-rationalization. Like a good chunk of it is like like the ethos itself, I'm down with because like it kind of discourages a lot of bad behavior that had become popular. But like as it being like a golden product methodology, I'm not like I'm not that convinced. Like I think you could tell me we haven't read the lean book, and we're not going to read the lean book, and we're still going to try and build the best product we can. And I wouldn't say it affects your odds of success either way, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I also think there are a lot of people that kind of, well, haven't read the Lean book, but have worked out what the whole concept is based on a knowledge of maybe 6 or 7 words.
Yeah.
It's you were at the Lean Startup Conference this year, and that's really kind of come on a long way over the years, hasn't it? And I'm curious as to your kind of view and sense of how that's being adopted by bigger organisations at the moment.
Yeah, so I think where Lean Startup has a lot to offer is or it seems to be in large organizations. Because as I spoke to attendees at that conference, and I wasn't really speaking about product strategy there at all. I was talking about communication with user interviews and stuff. But as I talked to people there, like it was clear like that. Two things were clear to me. One, most people there were from larger companies, not small companies. Now that could be a function of the price tag and a few other pieces as well. But secondly, like I think the idea that things can be done quicker on a smaller budget with faster turnaround and faster feedback is actually an idea that has a lot of traction if you're working in a bank where people talk in quarters or years for projects. The idea that someone could we'll build like a paper prototype, we'll run it past 7 people, and we'll come back up and we'll hack together something in next year, and we'll have some wireframes, and those tools and those techniques and those processes. It was like they were just kind of not. They're like a foreign object when you take it to a very large institution that's more like used to dealing in like, as I said, quarters and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of value to add there. In terms of like actual fresh startups born in 2013, 2014, I think I don't think Lean has changed that much. Basically, I don't think that the startup ecosystem has gotten way more efficient because of it. I think good things are good and bad things are bad, and life moves on. We weren't in an era where like people were raising like 20 million and having champagne parties and hiring 500 programmers to build like a V1. That just wasn't happening. Like, and it hasn't been happening for what I can tell for quite some time. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still meet a lot of people that are really puzzled that they aren't getting their 20 million for the champagne parties. I mean, certainly. I mean, I don't know how this is in Dublin and the Valley, but there seems to be a lot of people with ideas, but not necessarily the kind of the vision and the just the persistence to pull them off at the moment. And I do feel maybe the market and the startup kind of ecosystem and industry is getting a little bit out of control at the moment. There's a sort of a bit of evidence of bubbly behaviour. Is that something you're seeing in Dublin? Is that something you're seeing in?
There's not that much. There's very little. Like there's probably like 5 or 6 actual like significant Irish investors capable, or like investment firms capable of writing like 6-figure checks and above, and they all seem to be pretty prudent. I'd nearly say too risk averse. So it's not an issue there. And what I would say is like I do feel that like now, like there has been for the last, I guess I'd say 10 years, like there's no shortage of people walking around with ideas for startups. There's just none. Like and there never has been. And like honestly, like the people who really actually want to do it, as opposed to people who want to play startup, will go off and they'll learn some skills that will help them do it. They'll either hack together some effort of design for it, or they'll learn how to code some basic pieces, or they'll go to like different like incubators and find people who can code and they'll try to sell them on their idea. But like Ireland, like London, and I've certainly seen people in both. There's definitely plenty of people who they're the same people who walk around who have that great idea for a song or have a really good screenplay. Now they're never going to write this screenplay, but they have an idea for it. And in their head, like having the idea is great because in the idea phase, nothing has gone wrong, basically, right? Nothing has gone wrong at all, and that's why they love it, because they never have to answer any hard questions. Just like when people who have an idea for a novel, they can just talk about it for ages. Yeah, it's going to be this murder. It's going to be in the south of France. Blah blah. It doesn't really matter. You never have to get into any of the nitty gritty details.
Yeah.
So, like the phrase I like to think about on this, and I think maybe Ryan Singer said it first, is that like like a little sketching and experimenting is exploration, whereas if you're doing it too much, it's procrastination. And I think basically people who procrastinate over startup ideas are never actually going to achieve it. The people who really want it find a way to get it. Yeah.
No, that's a great point. And on the subject of procrastination, Den is asking. Des asked the other day on Twitter whether there's any app that answers the question, "How am I spending my time?" Did anyone answer that sensibly for you? How are you spending your time at the moment? And do you think the quantified self will become more and more important in a business context?
Okay, so three questions there. So I guess like the answer to the first one is like, did anyone answer that? Like you can see on obviously if it's any tweet you can see the replies, and a couple of people said they're like they have ideas and stuff, but nothing firm.
Isn't this the last question?
So then the second question was, how do I spend my time? Well, like, to dip back into the first question for a second, the reason I wanted this tool was that, like, I feel like everyone's calendar contains a lot of information about what they do, and I feel like no one does anything with that information, right? And it kind of came from the idea of, like, I wrote a post a while ago called Magical Software. I talked about a little bit about a business software where like these tools where like with one click you authorize a source of data and then you get all this instant value. So my calendar is a massive source of data about how and when I spend my time and what I do and who I meet and where I meet them and where I am in the world and all that sort of stuff. And yet there's no way to actually like aggregate that and to see
interrogate it.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and it kind of reminds me. I can't remember who said this quote, but it sounds like a Peter Drucker quote. But anyway, something like it says like you can find a company's strategy in its checkbook stubs, not in its PowerPoint slides. Now that's not exactly Peter Drucker because he didn't have PowerPoint, but the main point being it's easier to if you ask so question 2 here was how do I spend my time. And I can answer that question for you, but I'm answering it based on how I think I spend my time, kind of mixed with how I'd like to spend my time, not how I actually spend my time, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want this tool for. But like, so to pile it all back, I wear many hats in Intercom. I work on things like the customer success team. I do things like this, which you can consider some form of marketing. I go and I speak at conferences, and I generally try to tell the entire world about Intercom. And to all the listeners, please help me in this call and tell everyone else about Intercom too. And then I go, I also write on the blog again, another form of marketing, I guess. I sit in a lot of product work. I attend a lot of product meetings, and then like you've other like sort of company overhead things. Like I go to board meetings. I do one-to-ones with each of my direct reports, all that sort of stuff. That's roughly like all the different tasks. As to spend my time, I don't know. Someone build me the tool, and I will tell you. But yeah, your last question about quantified self, I'm kind of on the fence about. Like I think someone's going to build a good calendar tracking tool, and that tool will answer the question: would their quantified self has any value in business? But I'll tell you straight up, there's definitely value in being able to tell people, particularly people who are calendar oriented and have a reasonably full calendar, how they spend their time. And I think it was Mark Suster, or maybe no, I'm pretty sure it was Mark Suster. He said that like one of the things he does with like new CEOs he invests in. Is first he asks them how they spend their time, and then he says, okay, can you add me to your calendar, please? And then he using a human intellect, he'll go through and tell them, here's how you're actually spending your time. So do you know the way you say it's really important you talk to customers? You did that 4 hours in the past month. You know the way you say you hate meetings? You've been to 112 hours of meetings in the past month. And they're like, oh shit. That's kind of what I end up doing to try and understand where I can claw back time, what I should say no to. Even being on this Hangout call is a conscious choice based upon how many hours I've spent on these type of activities this week. Whereas I think that, but like you have to kind of get to that point where it is actually a conscious trade-off, because like companies spend millions per month or billions per month in some cases, and every of that is budgeted and accounted, and you say like we're gonna spend no more than like 4% of our total OPEX on this and all that sort of stuff. But no one does that with time. Yet, like in most companies, I can walk in and say I want 16 people in this room for an hour. And like no one actually goes, Jesus, actually we don't have that budget allocated, Des. So like it's just funny how like everyone kind of universally agrees time is money, and we remunerate time with money in most of the Western world. But at the same time, no one ever tries to account for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't remember who it was, but someone, when they have a meeting, it's American entrepreneur CEO, kind of works out basically the dollar cost of everybody in the room, and then just goes in with
Yeah,
an hour's worth of dollars, sticks them on the table, and peels them off in little chunks
yeah.
as the meeting goes on. And I think it's very easy to kind of get sucked into that. That being said, in fact, we're heading up for 2 o'clock, so I know you've got a ton of stuff to do. But yeah, very, very cool indeed. I really appreciate you catching up, and look forward to seeing you in June in Cambridge for Business Software Europe. Um, is there anything that you want to ask people who are watching or picking up? Or
No, I mean, one thing that would be useful is we're thinking about, like, I mean, I presume most of these people have either heard of you guys or heard of us. And one thing we're really interested in is like what content or what directions people would like to hear more about on our blog. So if people want to either tweet me or reply to you or just basically put the word out somewhere.
sure.
If there's any types of topics that we've talked about or I've presented about or whatever that have resonated and you'd like us to go deeper on, do let us know, because much like I said in product, we don't want to add whole new units. We want to go deep in things we're good at. We'd like to do the same with content too. So that's
Yeah.
that. Other than that, check out Intercom. Please
Fantastic.
follow.
You actually get an elevator pitch as part of the deal here, so
Oh, sweet. Oh, really?
Com does again.
So if you have a web or an internet business of any sort, mobile or not, Intercom will show you who is using your product, what they're doing, and then we'll let you communicate with them based on what they do or don't do. So for example, if you have a project management tool or a time tracker, you can do things like send this message to this person if on day 3 they have not done the following. Or conversely, you can do things like get product feedback from people. So if you want to improve your date picker, you can say, show me everyone who's used our date picker more than 1,000 times and get feedback from them, because they're the people who have the best response. You can also ask for that feedback in the product, which is the right place to do it, because an email will arrive on their phone when they're on the toilet and they're not giving you feedback about a date picker. So communication, Intercom is a communications platform that lets businesses communicate with customers about their product, through their product, and it can send emails, push, mobile, all the other things you expect. But its core value at its basic element is it's basically literally probably the most complete way for internet businesses to communicate with their customers.
Fantastic, fantastic. Appreciate it, and I know that people don't just say good things about you and your sort of talking style, but people rave about the business as well, as you already know. Des, really appreciate it. One thing I'd love you to think about blogging about is venture capital and whether it's a necessary evil. Or I remember Dharmesh at BoS a few years ago said that venture capital is neither necessary nor evil. And I think your experiences have been very interesting, because you've got a chunk of money, you've got some great investors, and you're definitely feeling in control. And I think that's something that is always an interesting thing to hear about.
Cool. I'll be sure to bring it up.
Excellent. All right. Take very good care. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. This will be available on the web, and don't forget to catch Des at Business Software Europe at the end of June. See you soon. Thanks, Des.
Bye-bye.
Bye.